confidence, best practices for accurate financial planning. We are so glad that you're able to join us today. As I've noted, my name is Nancy Quello. I am in the marketing department within Markham Technology, and I will be your host for today's session. Before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping rules. We can just, perfect. Disclaimer, Markham LLP and Markham Technology LLC have prepared these materials as part of an educational program. The information contained herein is of a general nature and is not intended to address the circumstances of any particular individual, entity, or case. While every effort has been made to offer current and accurate information, errors can occur. Furthermore, laws and regulations referred to in this program may change over time and should be interpreted only in the light of a particular circumstances. The information presented here should not be construed as legal, tax, accounting, or valuation advice. No one should act on such information without appropriate professional advice after a thorough examination of the particular situation. Now, logistics. Give it a minute while we flip over to our next slide. Okay. During today's program, you can submit questions for our presenters using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom platform. They will get to as many questions as they can towards the end of the webinar. We will be emailing a copy of the slides, as well as the link to the recording to all of our attendees post-event. If you would like to receive continuing professional education credits for CPAs for attending today's session, you will need to be active at a minimum of 50 minutes, answer 3 polling questions, not the practice session, that was just a practice polling question, but from here on out, any CPE credits that pop up, you would have to answer 3. And by the way, folks, if you have multiple monitors, please look at all of the monitors. Sometimes the main screen doesn't include that polling question. And in the event that you do run into any issues that you can't see the polling question, please feel free to reach out to me on the chat here on Zoom, and we'll get that coordinated and hopefully figured out. But anyways, back to essentially what the requirements are for the CPE credits. So minimum 50 minutes, answering 3 polling questions that will appear randomly on your screen. Each polling question will be active for 1 minute. So please be sure to select an answer and submit your responses for tracking purposes. Also, please allow 24 to 48 hours for us to process your CPE certification. Now, without further ado, I will pass it along to Stacy Brown, Vice President of Markham Technology. Stacy?
Well, if you're on the East Coast, good afternoon. You're on the West Coast, good morning. My name is Stacy Brown. I'm VP of FP&A Solutions here at Markham Technologies. I'm responsible for helping clients implement FP&A solutions to create efficiencies with their budgeting and reporting process. Prior to joining Markham, I implemented FP&A tools for about 10 years. And then prior to that, I implemented a mid-market ERP system called Dynamics GP. I was a Microsoft certified trainer and professional in that application. My entire career has been focused on helping the Department of Finance and Accounting leverage software to create efficiencies. I truly find joy in my life by giving you time back in yours. I hand it over to Anna to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm a solutions consultant from Vena. I've been in the FP&A industry for about 4.5 years, working on a finance team, doing some implementations, and then now in my role today as a solutions consultant, where I can run different demos, showing a lot of the value that Vena can bring, and as well answering any technical questions that may come up.
So before we start our presentation, I want to go over the learning objectives for today. First, we're going to develop the knowledge of best practices for forecasting. And then second, address common forecasting challenges that we see many of our clients and prospects have before implementing an FP&A solution. So why Markham and who is Markham Technology? Markham LLP was founded in 1951, and Markham Technologies was founded in 2001. Markham Tech is the technology arm of Markham LLP, a national CPA firm supporting a vast number of industries, as you can see below. Markham LLP is currently ranked 12th nationally within the United States. With the unique ability to leverage our intimate relationship with Markham LLP, we have access to a deep bench of financial, business, operational, and industry specialists. When weaved together, our team compounds our delivery for success and outcomes and becomes an indispensable partner. So what services does Markham Technology provide? Markham Technology helps our clients. Can you move to the next slide, Anna? Apologies.
Yep.
Markham Technology helps our clients effectively converge business and technology. We really provide our services in 5 pillars. So if we're looking at the bottom, we have cybersecurity, which helps our clients secure their business. We then have managed IT services, where clients can use us for IT augmentation. We can do part-time IT support functions, your remote help desk, for example, as well. We have cloud and infrastructure solutions, providing services around private cloud, infrastructure support, and disaster recovery. Then we get into strategic consulting, where we assist really the back office departments of accounting and IT with assessments around their current software stack, what strategies they should be put in place to assist in the growth of their organization and their future. And then finally, we have digital consulting, where we provide software solutions specific to creating efficiencies in the Department of Finance and Accounting. And that's where we're going to focus our time today in our digital consulting pillar. Now today, throughout the webinar, we're really going to go over 4 areas where you can create efficiencies in your planning process that you're currently using today. We're going to go over 4 scenarios that we typically see and the efficiencies gained by implementing an FP&A application. We'll start with scenario 1 and 2, where we'll provide insights around the overall budget process and preparing for the quarterly and monthly forecasts, right? So more of those administrative tasks. Then we'll discuss how we create efficiencies within workforce planning and reporting. After each section, my co-presenter, Anna, will show you throughout the presentation how Vena can help in each area. Before we jump into scenario number 1, I want to ask our first polling question. Do you currently allow your department or division leaders to enter and submit their budgets? Yes, no, but we'd like to, or no, this stays within the finance and accounting team.
So Stacy, while we are waiting for folks to submit over, what do you typically see? And what basically, if you were to take a best guess, what guess would you take?
I'm going to say a lot of people say no, but we would like to, just because typically people aren't using an FP&A solution. So it's hard to disseminate the data, and typically it stays within the Department of Finance. So that's going to be my guess.
Okay. Well, I can't tell you if you're right or wrong just yet. So we have 10 more seconds in the polling. If in the event you are experiencing issues and you're not able to see your polling, please verify that it's not on a different screen. If you are still experiencing issues, please contact me on the chat function here. Okay, we're going to end our poll.
So it does look like there are more people that already disseminate their budgets across departments and divisions. And my answer was the last in the ranking. So I'm pretty impressed with everyone. So let's talk about our first scenario. Here, I want to introduce everybody to Bob. Bob works at company ABC, and he is yet to implement an FP&A application. Every month, he sends out an email to each budget owner, identifying their tasks, timelines, and expectation. Bob does this for 15 budget owners, and he's always worried he's going to send sensitive data to the wrong person via email. Most of his time throughout the next month is spent meeting with them to clarify those expectations, begging and pleading for them to return complete and accurate documents. But he has no insight into how far they've gotten. Does this sound familiar to you? In many organizations that have not implemented an FP&A application, They rely solely on Excel, struggling in many areas of the overall process. There's no workflow and there's no security controls in place, as Excel sheets are sent to individuals to fill out. The Excel sheets eventually do return to FP&A, where they make additional changes to the numbers based on the overall strategy and goals of the organization, limiting the budget owner's overall ownership of the budget or forecast. Bob, like so many, would love to imagine a world where his 15 budget owners can see their required tasks, eliminating confusion and eliminating additional calls or sessions between him and the budget owners. He would like a system that can automatically send out reminders of overdue tasks, eliminating several minutes of remedial work he does on a daily basis. He'd also like a system where he can see the status of each task that is required by the end users to complete, so he can identify any bottlenecks in the workflow process. Lastly, he'd like to be able to go home at night confident and be able to get a long night's sleep knowing the organization's data is secure. Let's move on to scenario number 2. Scenario number 2. Sasha works for Weststar Healthcare, an organization with over 30 locations. Each month, she is required to roll forward the forecast and have each location make updates to their expected target. Accounting closes the books by the 7th business day, and then Sasha updates each file with actuals for the prior month. This month, she found several reference areas. I don't know how many times that is in common, and updated the files to include new natural accounts the organization's added, and set the file up for several new locations the healthcare organization acquired. Sasha is starting to dread this aspect of her job. She wishes she could spend more time working with budget owners on their forecasts and less time updating Excel files and hoping she didn't miss anything. Like Sasha, many organizations struggle to update Excel files with actuals because it's an extremely manual process. In Sasha's case, she's having to take the actuals from her ERP system, open up 30 different files, and update the actuals for each of those locations. I talk to people every day that are in her situation. They have Excel workbooks that have 20 or more tabs or 30 Excel files that they spend more time updating each tab for new accounts and new dimensions, and also validating that the data from that they copied and pasted in from their ERP system is aggregating correctly. Sasha, on her hand, has taken an initiative. She has started to talk to her FP&A director about potentially using an FP&A tool. She has seen in previous jobs how source systems can automatically update the plan with actuals every night, eliminating the need for her to do it manually and drastically reducing the chance for error. I'm going to hand it over to Anna so she can show us within the Vena application how we can not only get insights into the overall process for Bob and potentially identifying those bottlenecks within the process, but also help Sasha in pulling in actuals into her rolling forecast.
Awesome. So to do that, I'm just going to start off logging into Vena itself. So Vena is a cloud-based platform, meaning that we can get into it using any browser we want. In this case, I'm going to be using Google Chrome. And so that we can look at some of these super user type features that Nancy talked about, I'm going to be logging in as a super user today. So the login is the same no matter what kind of user we are, but the screen that we come into looks a little bit different. So because we're a super user, we see a lot of our different roles at the top here. And then in terms of managing our process, we would be in the manager portion. But in terms of talking about exactly or illustrating some of the points that Stacey mentioned, let's start in our admin tab here. So our admin tab is where we're able to configure all of our different users. So add users, take away users, but also configure all of our different permission needs. We use role-based permissions. And so in that way, if we do have any rollover in terms of our end users, we can easily add and take them away from different user groups without having to reconfigure any of our permissions here. Permissions are very easy for us to configure in here. We can come into our data permissions, select the exact type of permission we want and the actual data model we want to work in if we have many data models. So in here, let's make a change within our reporting cube. So as you can see, we have a couple of permissions in place. I have permissions around what entities can be seen in this group, as well as which accounts we want to be seen. But on top of that, I can do permissions on any of the dimensions I want. So in this particular case, I'm going to change it so that this person is only able to see the department D10. And so once this person who is in this group is actually going through any of their budgeting or going through any of their reporting, they are going to be confined into only seeing department D10. So that Bob can feel secure when that all of his end users are only seeing information that is pertinent to them. Once we have all of our permissions set up the way that we like, we can immediately go ahead and work on our specific process. So that workflow aspect here, we have a start point, an end point, and everything in between are our different tasks that need to be done within our process. With Vena, this workflow is very much the backbone of our entire platform. And that's because it allows us to very visually see exactly what our process looks like, but it also guides actually how that process goes. So rather than Bob having to send out emails to all 15 different budget owners, he doesn't have to do that anymore because the process within Vena does it for him. For example, we can see in our revenue task, we have different owners that are already attached here. And so right when this task comes up, they will be automatically sent email notifications to tell them exactly what they need to get done. Showing another example of this, more specifically, we can look at our expense planning tab. So here we have everything split up by our different entities. So all of our email notifications are being sent to them. And again, in that expense planning task, we have all of our information that we could need. So really helping Bob from that automation standpoint. So now once he's happy with this, he puts the process in play and we're off to the races. So now let's switch views and see what this would actually look like for one of our end users. Okay. So in this case, I've already logged into Vena using that exact same screen, but this time I'm logged in as Frank Jones. Frank Jones is a budget owner. He comes into Vena, gets his stuff done, and gets out. Really easy for him because we have our prioritized to-do list with all the information that he could need. Here we see the configured side of what Bob had set up for him. We can see everyone that's included within a specific task, any instructions that Bob left for him, any supporting documents, as well as a comments field. So if we have any questions that weren't answered in our instructions and our supporting documents, we can have all of our collaboration right in here, taking away a lot of that manual effort from Bob, making sure that he can talk to all of his end users, but also not get lost in any of the messages when his inbox is getting filled up because of these budgeting questions and also his other responsibilities. Last but not least, we have our forms here. And so this is where we have everything that I need to fill out as an end user as Frank Jones. And so now we can see exactly what this budget actually looks like, and we can see exactly what Bob would be looking at. We are always being taken directly from Google Chrome right into Excel itself. And so one thing about Vena is that we don't actually save any of our data within Excel. Everything is saved within our centralized database, meaning that it's really easy for us to, meaning that all of our data is really secure, so Bob can sleep easy, but also in terms of our end users, they can easily use our choose box to go from planning their sales department to services to marketing, etc., all within the same template. And so again, from the administrator's point of view for Bob, he only ever needs to maintain one template, but all of us as budget owners have our unique feel when we're in our template itself. Okay. And so then when I open this up, I can see all of my specific data that we would want flowing in right into my template here. And from there, I'm off to the races. I can do all of my budgeting in this template. Also, this template has been made to be very flexible so that we can not only budget, but we can also work on our forecast in here too. So let's just take a quick step back and talk a little bit about data, and we'll talk about it more through other points within our webinar today. But the first step in an implementation is bringing all of our data into Vena from our ERP system or whatever source system we have in order for Vena to be our source of truth moving forward. Okay. So in Stacy's second example, she was talking about Sasha and how rolling forward is kind of annoying when it comes to making our forecast, because there's copying and pasting, because we have to do all of our data loads, because we have to create a whole new set of financials and any input templates that we need, right? A lot of manual effort, but in Vena, all of that manual effort is done. So for example, right now we are looking at Frank's view, and in this situation, we are thinking that we are currently in October 2023, and so we have 9 months of actuals as well as 3 months of forecast moving forward. As this month is done, as this month closes, rather than Sasha in the back end having to go through and make everything all anew, I'll show you exactly what that process would look like for us. So coming back into my main process here, I can simply go into my settings, change my process variable so that our last closed month is October rather than September. All right, click save. Great. And then I can immediately go back into my template, refresh my data, and now we have our actualized numbers that are popping up for me as an end user with our 2 months of forecast still open. So as an end user, for me, exact same experience. I have the exact same template, but for Sasha, now her life is a lot easier because it's just changing a process variable rather than doing a lot of copying and pasting.
I think you just took a week of Sasha's time and made it like 2 seconds.
Exactly. That's the plan. All right, I'll go back into our slideshow now.
All right, so polling question number 2. How granular do you budget your workforce? Very granular, so you're budgeting by employee, by every single benefit and tax available to that employee. Somewhat granular, so you're doing it by employee, but maybe you're using an average percentage for tax and benefit, or not at all. You're just taking a percentage increase from last year's budget.
So folks, we have 30 more seconds left before we had to take down the polling question. Do have an 88% participation rate. 90 now, thank you folks. So 20 more seconds before we essentially have to close the poll, but then we'll be sharing the results in just 10 more seconds. So far, there is a very significant winner, but I'll leave the suspense and I'll hand over, and here are the results.
All right. So right as I expected, most people are doing existing employees at a granular level, but they're using average tax and percentages and benefit percentages. This is the most common that I see among individuals who budget when they're using solely Excel. What I do see is that as people implement FP&A tools, they tend to be more of that very granular state. And what you'll see with Erin, so Erin here, she works for Kirkland Bank, and she's responsible for maintaining workforce, budget, and forecast, which is 70% of her organization's overall budget. She's in control of a lot. She receives a manual file from HR every month listing all the employees that are currently employed at the bank. Then she spends several days meeting with departments and location leaders to update the plan for open positions. Because there's a wide range of benefits provided to employees, and Erin, uses an average percentage for taxes and benefits. Inevitably, there is always a large discrepancy between actuals and plan, and our CFO would like to reduce that variance since it is 70% of the organization's overall cost. Like Erin, organizations struggle to accurately budget for labor costs. Like I mentioned earlier, typically, most people do an average for taxes and benefits. And what they typically see is a negative variance at the beginning of the year and a positive variance at the end of the year. When organizations use that percentage to calculate taxes and benefits, they also spread the costs evenly across the year. So instead of identifying when an expense is incurred, so maybe you pay your health care benefit twice a year, or when a cost actually hits its maximum, so your federal unemployment tax is a good example, where typically that's more of a cost at the beginning of the year for all your existing employees versus at the end of the year. And everything is reliant on Erin, right? She's having to meet with all of her individual departments and location leaders because they can't see the Excel file because they can only talk about what their department has. So she spends a lot of time with each department because it is sensitive data. And so because they're using Excel and there is no security around it, it's falling on her. And what she imagines is a world where she can upload an employee roster into a system and then calculates those benefits and taxes by the elections that the employee makes. So is it PPO family? Is it HSA individual employee, right? At that very granular level. And then she would like it so that each budget owner can log in, they can update their current open positions or any changes or approvals that they got, reducing not only her time, but everyone else's time in having to meet and coordinate those calendars, right? I think everybody struggles with that, especially now post-COVID. And she would like to spend more of her time researching the variances and completing what if scenarios on labor plans, right? We're getting into a market now where we're looking at, are we hiring employees? Are we lowering our employee count, right? And she's able to more focus on what that plan could look like versus trying to figure out why her actuals versus plan didn't tie. So polling question number 3. How long does it take you every month to disseminate reports? 2 hours or less, 1 day, or 3 days or more?
So if you haven't answered our polling question yet, please feel free to do so. We're going to have to leave that polling question up for 40 more seconds. Folks, if you have missed a polling question, do not worry. We have a total of 4 polling questions, and the requirement is an answering of 3 out of the 4. Okay, so 30 more seconds. But it also does look like very similar to the last type of scenario. It looks like there's a significant outlier. Now, I don't want to put any of the speakers on the spot, but do any of the speakers want to take a guess at who is going to be the clear winner?
I want to say
like it's
3
not
days
going to
or
be
more.
2 hours or less. Oh, sorry, Stacey.
Yeah. No, I think we're both on the same page. I was going with more days. You're going with it's not going to be. I like your choice. Like your choice.
Yes, you have to have more confidence. Only 1 day is the clear winner.
1 day. So if you're being able to update all your reports with your actuals in Excel, update all the new accounts, update and create any new departments and include them in your departmental reporting, and you're doing all of that in 1 day, I would say kudos to you for doing it in Excel. But with an application like Vena, you'd probably be able to get it down to that 2 hours or less. So that brings us to our last scenario of the day. I want you to meet Krishna. He works at We Wish nonprofit organization, and he's responsible for distributing accurate financial statements each month to department heads. He's also responsible for putting together the board reports and presentations that are sent out quarterly. We Wish is a small nonprofit, and Krishna spends more time every month pulling data from several different sources. He pulls financial data from his ERP system. He pulls some statistical data from his grant information or grant management application. And then he pulls some HR data from his payroll system. Like Krishna, many organizations spend 75% more time collecting and aggregating data and only 25% of the time analyzing that data. Like many, Krishna imagines a world where those percentages are flipped. And he spends more time analyzing the data and identifying key strategies that can improve an organization. I think that statement there turns an FP&A person from just an individual that has to do a job within an organization to that business partner, right? Is really flipping the percentage of time you're spending analyzing the data. He wants his reports to update nightly with actuals, so he doesn't have to do it, from the various source systems. He wants his budget owners to be able to take ownership of their departments and their divisions and be able to drill through reports to investigate the plan versus actual variances on their own. So they don't need to come to him and ask him, well, why is there a variance or what makes this up? He's really empowering them to do it on their own. When migrating from Excel to an FP&A solution, these really last two scenarios are probably the most important items I see individuals struggle with and want to achieve efficiencies. So that's workforce planning and reporting. And I'm going to hand it over to Anna for the last remaining time with you to go over how Vena can help with both scenarios.
Great. So first, let's go into the workforce planning piece that Stacey was talking about, some of the struggles that Aaron goes through. With Vena, we have everything all in one template. And again, we're always going into our templates using from the platform itself. So going in here, we're always going directly from Google Chrome right into Excel. And as always, we have no data in here because we are using our choose box to decide exactly which slice of data we want to look at. One thing to note here is that we also have a scenario choose box here. And so we can very easily make different versions of our budget or different versions of our forecast, analyze them, and then see which version makes the most sense for us to go forward with. Adding to that idea of allowing FP&A professionals to do more of the analysis part and less of the manual planning. So with that, I can apply my selections, have all of my data flow right into my template here. So unlike the budgeting template that I showed earlier, our first step when it comes to looking at our workforce planning is also bringing in data, but we're bringing in our HR data from our HRIS system so that we can have all of our information at the employee level on our rows. And in bringing in this data, we are taking away that manual effort of actually typing in everyone's actual name and employee number, which in my experience can have a lot of human error potentially with just a small misspell, which ends up in an extra head count that we didn't budget for. And now we need to figure out where it all came from. That headache is completely gone with Vena because we're doing our data load right into our template here. And then also it's completely locked down. So even if I wanted to make a change in here, I wouldn't be able to because this is our source of truth now. And that also gives us time to do our actual planning and put our effort actually into planning our existing and our new employees. Also, because of the architecture of how Vena is set up, now Aaron doesn't need to meet one-on-one with all of our different department heads because our department heads can get their own, are sent their automatic email notifications to fill out each individual department of their employee information. Their data is completely secure to just their specific department. And so now Erin can do more of a review step and focus her efforts more on doing actual analysis rather than doing all of this one-on-one planning, meeting with everyone, making sure everything is correct because they didn't have this security before. So going into the actual planning here within Vena, it's all done in this template, really easy, really straightforward. We can plan for our existing employees, our new employees, transfers, and allocations as well. When it comes to our existing employees, we can start right in the center here, inputting any terminations, changing any statuses, adding any comments we need. From there, we can also input anything when it comes to our salary. So whether it's an annual merit increase or it is an override on our salaries, we can do that all within this template here. We can even tell Vena exactly when we want any changes to occur. So as to Stacey's point earlier, we have a really accurate budget going forward. We don't have a positive variance at the beginning and a negative variance at the end, leading us to an inaccurate budget. Further from that, we can plan our salaries. We can also plan our other compensation. So as part of our HRIS data load, we like to include the work region. And so then we can do our state-dependent taxes and benefits so that FUTA, SUTA, FICA, 401k, all of those different things are calculated within this template itself without any extra effort from me as a user. Also, if there's ever any issues, we can always do some overrides to make sure that our data is as accurate as possible. All of the naming here is also completely configurable. So if instead of having a quarterly MBO, we have a different kind of bonus we want to include, we are in Excel. We can make any changes we need to. We have the flexibility so that it's really easy, not only for our administrator, but also for our end users. We can do all of our different bonuses here. Also, we have a lot of blank areas, as in like places that you can fill in if there are extra different things that you need to have included in your budget. For example, when I was in implementation, I would see things like a travel expense or a cell phone expense, right? Those are specific to different industries, to different companies, but we definitely want them to be reflected within our plan. And so of course we have those spaces open and available for us to make any changes. From there, we can also do all of our planning for our new employees right on this template too. I can add in a new request. I put in that request number. I put in the role that we're trying to fill in here. And then I insert my row and I can start doing all of the planning that I would need to. Put in my hire dates, put in my statuses, put in my FTE. I can do all of my other compensation, making sure that everything is accurate so that, again, we have that really robust budget moving forward, but taking a lot less time and having all of that security in place. On top of that, when it comes to our new employee requests, within here, we also have our approvals by employee automatically built in, so that when our budget owners are inputting their new employees, if they're only allocated 10 employees and they accidentally request 15, we can reject those extra 5, making sure that we have a really good budget moving forward. Always kind of having that workflow in mind for us and having the flexibility to have our approval process right within our template here. Once we're happy with how it looks, we can immediately see everything rolled up on our payroll summary. So we have our FTE count and our headcount statistics that we can use in our OpEx planning. So for things like hardware or software expenses, we have our headcount already in place. Again, we get a really accurate budget from there. We also have everything rolled up into our actual GL lines so that we can see exactly what our salary and wages are going to look like, our different benefits, our different taxes in here. And so with Vena, we're able to plan at that very granular level without putting in the effort to plan at that very granular level. Okay. This is an example of a little bit of what we were talking about with Krishna, so that reporting side, so looking at some dashboarding, having those visuals ready for us. Always we're looking at data in real time, right? So all of this data is accurate to everything that we have input into our template, as well as all of the data that has been loaded into the cube. And in this case, we're using Excel to make some dashboards to make it really easy for us to understand here. So from there, let's switch gears and look at some reporting to kind of see how all of this comes together. So I'll just exit out of here and I'll go right back into Vena itself, and we can look at some of our reports. So here we have a lot of different reports available. And so these are just the reports that are available to this end user. We can have as many or as few as we would want. But in this case, we're going to go right into our financial statements here. So one thing that Stacy was mentioning before as one of the pain points that we often see is this idea that we want to be able to see all of our data all in one place, even though we're bringing in some information from our ERP system, some information from our grant planning, other information from our payroll system, right? That takes a lot of effort, but all that effort is taken away with using Vena because we are doing our nightly loads, having our data brought into Vena automatically and seamlessly, so that for Krishna, rather than having to do those data loads himself, it's already ready for him. He just decides what he wants in his choose box and he's already off to the races. Also, so in our choose box here, I won't go into it too much, but we can choose to look at any, we can look at our business in any way, slicing and dicing using any one of our different dimensions. So with that, I can apply my selection and have all of my data flow right into my report here. At this point, we are in a very normal financial statement, right? In terms of our income statement, we have our months across the top, our GL lines and our rows. We can also use Excel functionality to group everything or to expand it out so that we can see it in very granular detail. We have our budget data, and we also have our current year data here with our actuals as well as our forecast. So I've spoken a little bit about data before, but I'm going to go into it a little bit more here to talk about kind of the pain point of bringing in data and how that manual process could be very difficult, but how Vena solves that with our automated loads. So again, when it comes to an implementation, our first thing is bringing in our data into Vena so that Vena can be our source of truth. With that, we undergo some rigorous data checking to make sure, again, that Vena can be our source of truth moving forward so that we can completely automate that data load, and our end users like Krishna, like Aaron, like Sasha, like Bob, they can be secure knowing that their data is correct whenever they're coming into Vena and not having to do that extra work that they might have done previously. Also, when we're bringing in our data, we're bringing it in at our most granular level, meaning that now we have the ability to drill right into any numbers that we want without having to go back into my ERP system. So if I want to see what makes up our OpEx expenses in January, I can simply do that by drilling my transactions, and it spits me out a table with all of the different transactions that make up that 2.3 million. And then from this point, I am just in normal Excel. I can go ahead and sort my table. I can also go in, filter it by specific vendors if I wanted to. I can make this into a pivot table. I can do some analysis on it using all of the Excel tools that we already know and love. That's why Vena uses Excel, because at least 84% of finance professionals are using Excel already, and therefore why up that learning curve when we're already using such a great tool. I can do all of these drill downs on our actuals, but I can also do them on those budgeted numbers too. So coming in here, I can look at my budget for my salaries and related. If I want to see what everything looks like in March, let's drill down on it and we can see everything that makes up that number. And again, we are in normal Excel. I can make it into a pivot table. I can sort it. I can filter it. I can analyze it. I can do whatever I want. And so I have full flexibility to look and understand my data without the headache of having to go into a lot of different reports or go through a lot of different files, go back into my ERP system, look into my payroll. I don't need to do that because everything is right here at my fingertips. And also with that in mind, bringing all of that information from different systems together, right? We have all of our payroll information right here, right in front of us. I don't need to go and pull a different report just to get that level of information here. Going into other parts of our report, we can see we have a balance sheet as well. Again, very standard layout. But the one thing here is that for me, for my specific view, I like to have my ratios at the top. Right? And because I'm in Excel, I have the flexibility to do that. But for someone else, if we wanted these ratios to be at the bottom, we could do that as well. Also, we could bring in any KPIs or any other information that we would want to in here, because again, the way that Vena works, we're bringing in all of our different data sources into Vena, one source of truth, and spitting it out into a nicely formatted report with all of our information right at our fingertips. We have a cash flow where we are also able to see different trend data if we want to. And finally, we have a variance report. I really like this report because I think that it's the best example of how we have so much information, so easy to digest all in one place. We have the exact same format as our income statement earlier, making it really easy for someone coming in here for the first time. But then from an analysis perspective, we have so much that we can go into. I can see my variance at a monthly, quarterly, and yearly level. I can see at first glance that we are looking at our actuals versus forecasts, but I have built-in toggles right into this report. So if I want to look at my actuals versus budget, for a specific year, for a specific period, I can simply change those toggles, refresh my data, and boom, I have a completely new variance report for me to look at, for me to use. And I can also go ahead and do the exact same drill functionalities that we were looking at on our income statement itself. So very, very robust from a reporting perspective. Another thing that Stacey was mentioning was the headache that it can be when we're adding in a new department or when we're adding in a new account, and how difficult that can be to add it in the ERP system and then add it again in our report and then replicate that in all of our reports and templates. Again, Vena makes that really streamlined for us. And so I'll show you a little bit about how that would actually work. So coming back into Vena as our super user, I'm going to go into the modeler tab this time. And so the modeler is where we keep all of our actual data. So what would happen if we're doing a data load and we have a new account with data in it for the first time, but we don't have it in our hierarchy in here? It would automatically be loaded into an unmapped folder right here. All of our unmapped accounts would come in right here, and then it would be the job of some user to come in and put this actual account into the correct hierarchy. So account 8,000, our bad debt expense, that's going to actually go into my general, my G&A. And so I can go ahead, grab this, and move it right into G&A. And then from this point, that account will be automatically viewable as long as it has data within all of our templates and reports. Similarly, if we wanted to do, if we had a new entity that we added, right, we wanted it to be shown in all of our reports, we could have it as an unmapped number that we would move, or another thing that we can do is simply add in a new entity itself, like that. And then I save it in here. So we already have a new entity, and I can go back into my financial statements. Actually, I'll reopen it actually, just to make sure that it works seamlessly. And once I reopen it, we will be able to immediately see that entity available for us to look at within our choose box options itself. So really giving us all of that flexibility is that we could need right within here. And so it should be showing up right here, but I guess because I don't have data in that entity yet, it's not showing up to me. So really making sure that we're letting our users get access to data that actually has data, not necessarily things that have just been added for other purposes. So that's fine there. And since I'm just talking about this part, one last thing I'd like to talk about here is that we can have different views depending on our different users. So then by that, in order to do that, we have our alternate roll-ups. So in terms of our immediate hierarchy, we are looking at everything geographically, right? We have our European entities as well as our US and Canadian entities. But if I wanted to see everything functionally, I could do that too. I can have everything rolled up by manufacturing centers, also sales and distribution centers. Or at the same time, if you want your own specific personal view, you can have your own view of your own entities where you have just your entities so that you can toggle through. I know when I was working with customers, that would come up sometimes because we sometimes want to see things in a specific way, and Vena has the flexibility to allow us to do all of that. The last piece that I'd like to talk about is our dashboarding, and it's using Vena Insights in order to see our data in a little bit of a different way. So coming back into the platform itself, we're going to this time go into our Insights tab. So Vena uses Power BI as our front end for our dashboarding. So in terms of making dashboards and looking at dashboards, we use Power BI. The big benefit is that we don't need an external license in order to use Power BI in here. It's all included within the Vena license. And it has a very, very similar user experience to using Power BI desktop itself. And the big win here is that not only do we have all of our information all in one place and very visually appealing, it's also very easy to make and very easy to just use. So Stacy was mentioning that Krishna really wants all of his data all in one place. I showed that in the reports, and I'm showing it again in our dashboard here. We have our KPIs at the top, and then we have different visuals showing us all of our information right in one place. Whether we want to look at our OPEX accounts, our gross margin, or our revenue, we can see exactly what we want to in these very visually appealing visuals. With this one, I would say is my favorite visual, our revenue by entity, because of how interactive it is. I can see everything on our global scale. I can zoom in, I can zoom out of it, I can move it around. Right, the size of the circle corresponds with how much revenue we have in each place. And if I rest my mouse on it, we can get even more information about that specific data point, whether that is sentences telling us exactly what's happening there, or a breakdown of our revenue by different accounts here. Completely configurable, but also extremely easy for our end users to see all of their data. Coming back into my report, I'll just show a couple of things in here. If we look at our profitability tab, we have, again, that same structure of having our slicers and our KPIs, but as well, we have a couple of different visuals. Of course, we have a waterfall. We always want waterfalls in our different board decks, and so we have to include that here. But within this, I still have that extra information if I hover over it, but I can also drill through directly into the underlying data and see exactly what makes up the 69 million here. The last tab I will go over is our predictive analytics. And so this is how we are going a step further from just looking at your own data, but using the power of machine learning and AI to get some more insights from our data. Here we're looking at two different graphs. We have our anomaly detection as well as our predictive forecasting. Starting with anomaly detection, what we're doing is our dashboard is looking into the data that we have within our data model, giving us a confidence interval. And basically, as long as our data, which is the green line, stays within our gray box, which is our confidence interval, we can be sure that our data makes sense, right? Everything looks good to me here. It's in our reasonable value. But at the point where our data falls outside of that gray box, we get this blip. And so Power BI is telling us a reason why this anomaly has occurred. And so from an analysis perspective, we can see this and then we can immediately go in and do an investigation. And so I really like what Stacey said earlier of like FP&A professionals, often it's 75% input, 25% analytics. And this is one of the ways where we can change that, right? Where we're going in and we're giving ourselves the ability to have that 75% of our time being in the analytics standpoint, because half of our investigation is already being done by the platform. So we can go the rest of the way and do the actual analysis that's going to improve our business in the end. Lastly, we have our predictive forecast here. And so what we're doing again is looking into our data, seeing exactly what our trends are in terms of seasonality. And then from there, we are being provided with a forecast of what our data could look like in the future. And so we're doing that using Power BI. We have a good idea what our data is going to look like for a couple of months out. And so then that gives us a starting point in terms of moving forward and looking forward in terms of our forecast, taking that time to make a forecast down from a month into mere seconds by using the different abilities that we have within Power BI, within machine learning, within AI itself. So with that, I can pass it back to Stacey in order to do some of our final polling questions.
So last polling question of the day, are you interested in an FP&A application? Yes, I'm actively looking into them right now. Yes, but we're planning for it in the next year's budget. Or no, we are already using a tool.
We have 40 seconds for folks to complete this polling question. Now, remember, folks, in order to be eligible for CPE certification, we would need to be active for 50 minutes, as well as answer 3 of the polling questions. In case you missed any of the polling questions, this is your opportunity to fill that in. We have just 20 more seconds, and then after those 20 seconds, we'll continue on with our closing remarks. But in the meantime, if you do have any questions, feel free to plug it into our chat. We do have a few extra minutes and our speakers should be able to respond to those questions. All right, few seconds left, folks. All right. Polling question is done. Stacey, take it away.
All right, so that brings us to our questions and discussions. Give everybody a few minutes to submit any questions they may have. While that's going on, just to kind of review what we went over today, the 2 objectives were to develop a knowledge of best practices for forecasting and to address common forecasting challenges people have, especially within Excel. I know we did it a little differently than you typically see in webinars, and we did it more of in a scenario perspective. I hope you guys were able to relate to those individuals and their storylines, but also pulled from it that imagine a world was your best practices, right? So we want to be able to see insights. We want to give people the ability to own their budgets and own their forecasts and be able to do their own research and not necessarily rely on the Department of Finance for that. But we want to do it in a way that it's secure, that it's easy to update and easy to manage from an FP&A standpoint. And then lastly, addressing the common forecasting challenges. I think Anna did a great job showing that within the Vena application today.
So we did receive a few questions on our chat. So one question that we received is the pricing for what I would assume is Vena for mid to large size firms?
So it does vary. It varies on what functionality within the Vena application you want to use, but also depends on the amount of users that you're using. So if you're looking for a pricing, I'd be happy if you emailed me. My information will pop here here shortly, and I can give you a more detailed answer to that question.
And then folks, we are receiving some questions on how the CPE certifications work. So please allow 24 to 48 hours for your CPE certification to be processed. And again, the requirements are that you would have to stay on for 50 minutes, which if you've been on since the beginning, you will definitely meet that, as well as answering 3 out of the 4 polling questions. Now, I did receive a few folks asking how many questions did I respond? How do I know if I responded the polling questions? At this point in time, the report was essentially that we download would essentially have that information. So if you have any concerns, and a few people have expressed to me those concerns, if you have any concerns, if the polling questions did not go through, please feel free to either reach out to me. I'm going to actually put my email address here on the chat. But for the folks that I have been answering questions through our Q&A, I'll be sure to follow up with you post-event. It's just at this moment in time, I don't have that information. We had to let the webinar to go. We would need to end the webinar in order for me to actually be able to see those reports. But hopefully I answered all the questions from the CPE logistics standpoint. And yes, we would be receiving our CPE certification via email. So whatever email address you submitted during registration, that's where we would be sending your certifications, again, assuming that you met those requirements. So I don't see any additional questions here on the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and thank Anna and Stacy for the great information, and more importantly, thanking everybody for joining us today. We do have another FP&A webinar queued up with Stacy in November. Folks, when I send over the slides as well as the recording of this session, please be on the lookout because the registration link will be on this slide. And then on the following slide is Stacy's information. So feel free to note it down now, or you can wait until we actually pass along the presentation slides. And then, of course, if you do need to reach out to me relating to any CPE concerns or questions, my email address is in the chat function. With that all being said, again, thank you everybody for joining us today on the first day of August, and we hope to see everybody in future events. All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.